The debate stage is bathed in a stark, cold light. The audience sits in tight rows, waiting, watching. Tension crackles in the air, an invisible line drawn between the two figures on stage. Kamala Harris, calm and composed, sits confidently at the podium, her fingers gently resting on the edge of the mic. Her eyes scan the room, focused, prepared. Across from her stands George Conway, dressed in his sharp suit, his expression one of calculated arrogance. The moderator asks a question about the future of the American political system, but before Harris can respond, Conway cuts in, his voice carrying across the hall with deliberate force. "Let's be clear," Conway sneers, his gaze fixed directly on Harris, "your party has no credibility left. Your policies, your endless promises, they've all failed. How do you stand there, defending a system that's broken beyond repair? You're complicit in the very corruption you claim to fight against. Do you even know what integrity means anymore?" A ripple runs through the audience. Conway's words hang heavy in the air, an insult aimed directly at Harris's character, her integrity. The tension in the room intensifies, his attack is not just a challenge to her politics, but to her very essence. Kamala doesn't flinch. She doesn't break. Her face remains a mask of dignity, but her eyes narrow slightly, a silent acknowledgement that the gloves are about to come off. The silence in the room is deafening, the crowd sensing that this moment will define everything. Her fingers tighten around the edge of the podium, her steady breath the only sound amidst the growing anticipation. She's not rattled. She's ready. The camera zooms in on her face, capturing the fierce resolve in her expression. The clock ticks down. The weight of the moment presses in, the countdown to her response almost palpable. The question isn't just about policy anymore. It's about something deeper. Something personal. The room holds its breath. What will she say? All eyes are on Kamala Harris, waiting for the words that will silence the room. The camera pulls back slightly, offering a wider view of the stage. The contrast between the two figures couldn't be more stark. Conway, standing tall, exudes an air of self-righteousness, a man who has built his public persona on calling out the hypocrisy of others. He has made a career of criticizing the lies, deceit, and dishonesty of the Trump administration. His Twitter feed alone is a battleground of indignation, each post dripping with condemnation. He prides himself on his moral superiority, on his ability to dissect the failures of the very system he's now part of. Yet here he is, making a personal attack on Kamala Harris, questioning her credibility in the very areas he once claimed to hold dear. The hypocrisy is palpable. He's supposed to be the champion of truth, but all that has crumbled into thin air. His criticisms are now aimed at the wrong target, at a woman who has spent her career fighting for the most vulnerable. She's been a prosecutor, a senator, and now the Vice President of the United States. She has walked the tightrope of politics with a sense of justice, a fierce belief in integrity, and a commitment to truth that few can match. But here's the catch, Kamala isn't just fighting for her own reputation, she's fighting for something far greater. Her response is not merely a defense of her own honor, it's a defense of the very political system that Conway claims to despise. It's a fight for the values that are under siege in this moment: unity, justice, dignity, and truth. For too long, figures like Conway have thrown stones from their glass houses, poking holes in the fabric of democracy while hiding behind a mask of righteous indignation. Conway's attack is a symptom of a larger issue, the erosion of integrity in American politics. It's a world where truth has become relative, and the line between right and wrong is increasingly blurred. In this battle, Harris stands as a beacon of what is right. She embodies the principles that have guided her throughout her life, a commitment to fairness, the belief that all people deserve justice, and the understanding that integrity isn't just a word, it's a way of life. For Kamala, this isn't just about Conway. It's about the very soul of the nation. It's about the fact that the public discourse has become toxic, that political leaders have become more concerned with winning arguments than with winning the hearts of the people. It's about the collapse of dignity in favor of the hollow pursuit of power. And this moment on the debate stage isn't just about a clash of personalities, it's the flashpoint in a larger battle for the future of America. Her voice echoes through the hall, steady and unyielding. The stakes are clear: stand up for truth, or let the darkness of hypocrisy and manipulation swallow the political landscape whole. This is a battle for the integrity of the American system, a battle Kamala Harris cannot afford to lose. And it's not just about her. It's about every American who believes in the ideals this country was founded on: equality, justice, and truth. On the other side, Conway's smugness is beginning to show cracks. The smile that once seemed so assured now falters at the edges. He may have expected an easy target, someone to brush off with clever words and insults. What he didn't anticipate was a force of nature like Kamala Harris standing firm, unwavering in her commitment to the truth. This moment, this exchange, is more than just a confrontation, it's the flashpoint of a much larger ideological war. The room feels heavier now. The stakes have been raised. The outcome of this exchange isn't just about who wins the debate, it's about whether the values that have shaped America will survive the assault of those who seek to undermine them. Kamala knows this. And as she stands there, poised to respond, it's clear, she's not just defending herself. She's defending the very soul of America. George Conway's rise in the political world was built on a foundation of vocal disdain for Donald Trump. The irony, of course, was impossible to ignore. Conway's entire public persona was predicated on his unwavering belief that Trump's moral compass was broken, that his politics were an affront to decency, and that the nation deserved better. Conway had the rhetoric down. He had the tone of righteous indignation, the words of a man who positioned himself as a defender of truth and integrity. It was his moral high ground that made him a darling of many liberals, especially as he publicly rejected the very man who had once been his ally. But here's where things get complicated. George Conway's transformation from loyal conservative to outspoken critic of Trump seemed sincere at first. His Twitter account became a battleground for truth-telling. He was not afraid to throw jabs at Trump's dishonesty, his corruption, his relentless self-interest. Conway wrote op-eds, gave speeches, and launched a steady stream of verbal volleys at the former president's administration, touting himself as a man of principle, someone who could see through the chaos and corruption that defined Trump's time in office. And for a while, he was applauded for it. Many thought of him as a voice of reason in an increasingly polarized world. But behind the curtain, things weren't so clear-cut. While Conway criticized Trump's behavior, his actions often told a different story. He wasn't above playing the same political games that Trump had mastered. His personal and professional life was filled with contradictions. Conway himself had been a key player in the political establishment he now so readily derided. He was a founding member of the Lincoln Project, a group of former Republicans who sought to undermine Trump's political ambitions. They marketed themselves as the moral alternative to Trumpism, positioning themselves as defenders of democracy and truth. But as time wore on, their tactics grew more divisive, their methods increasingly questionable. The lines between righteous opposition and political gamesmanship blurred, and Conway was in the thick of it. But it didn't stop there. Conway's own family ties exposed even deeper contradictions. His wife, Kellyanne Conway, was one of Trump's most trusted advisors, a figure deeply entrenched in the very administration Conway publicly condemned. For all his criticisms of the president's moral failings, Conway's personal life was a daily reminder of the entanglement between public service and political loyalty. It was hard to square his vocal opposition to Trump with the fact that he had married into the heart of the very machine he railed against. The contradictions mounted, leaving him open to charges of hypocrisy. And then there was his obsession with power. While Conway was critical of Trump's authoritarian tendencies, he often found himself in the same political circles, cozying up to those whose actions mirrored the very corruption he claimed to abhor. His public attacks on Trump were often seen as self-serving, a way for him to maintain his relevance in a world that had cast him aside. His moral high ground started to crumble, and with it, so did his credibility. The contradictions reached their peak when Conway began to shift his rhetoric. He no longer just condemned Trump. He started attacking anyone who didn't share his vision of what the country should be. His criticisms turned from principled opposition to personal vendettas. The same man who had once championed honesty, transparency, and integrity now seemed more interested in scoring political points, in creating chaos, than in bringing about real change. The once lauded critic of Trump had become a partisan player, more concerned with winning than with truth. And yet, in this moment, the debate with Kamala Harris, Conway believed he could reclaim his moral authority. He thought he could throw a punch and destabilize his opponent, positioning himself as the one with the upper hand. His attack on Harris was nothing more than a desperate attempt to salvage a reputation that had long since lost its shine. But what he didn't realize was that his own hypocrisy was about to be laid bare for all to see. His carefully crafted persona as the moral voice of reason, the champion of truth, was crumbling right in front of him. Conway had spent so much time building up the myth of his own righteousness that he had failed to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. His contradiction was his greatest enemy, and it was about to catch up with him in the most public way possible. Harris, on the other hand, represented something Conway could never fully grasp, the idea that integrity is not a weapon to wield for personal gain, but a principle to live by, even in the face of pressure. Conway's hypocrisy wasn't just about his actions, it was in the very way he framed his criticisms. He had spent so long pointing fingers, calling out the failures of others, that he forgot to examine his own. The room, still thick with tension from Conway's attack, now buzzed with the realization that his words were about to face a reckoning. Harris's calm composure contrasted sharply with the unraveling facade of Conway's moral superiority. The audience was on the edge of their seats, waiting for the inevitable. The moment was approaching where the contradictions Conway had spent years building up would be exposed, and with them, his downfall. This was no longer just a debate. It was a moment of reckoning, a moment that would force the audience to ask, who was the real defender of truth here? And when all was said and done, who would stand unscathed, and who would fall from grace? Kamala Harris didn't just arrive at the top of the political world by accident. Her journey was one of persistence, resilience, and a deep commitment to justice. Born to immigrant parents, her mother a cancer researcher from India, her father a Jamaican economist, Kamala was raised in a home where education, hard work, and fighting for what's right were the foundation of every conversation. Her upbringing wasn't one of privilege, it was one of sacrifice and perseverance. She knew from an early age that the world wasn't always fair, and that for people like her, immigrants, people of color, women, breaking through the barriers of systemic inequality would take more than just talent. It would take grit. Her early years were shaped by her mother's determination to give her and her sister every opportunity, despite the odds. Her mother taught her that the world might not always give her a seat at the table, but that didn't mean she couldn't build one of her own. Kamala carried this lesson throughout her life, shaping the way she navigated the legal and political landscapes that would soon become her battleground. After graduating from Howard University, Kamala entered the world of law with one clear mission: to serve people who had been forgotten, overlooked, or oppressed. She didn't want to just practice law, she wanted to change lives. As a prosecutor, she tackled cases head-on, taking on the toughest criminals while fighting for justice on behalf of the marginalized. But what set her apart wasn't just her legal prowess, it was her unwavering belief that justice wasn't a privilege for the few, but a right for everyone, regardless of their background or circumstances. Her path was far from easy. In the legal world, especially as a woman of color, Kamala faced significant hurdles. She was often underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. But with every challenge, she grew more determined. Whether it was in the courtroom, where she delivered impassioned arguments on behalf of victims, or as the district attorney of San Francisco, where she worked to reform the criminal justice system, Kamala always fought for what was right, not what was popular. Her tenure as DA was marked by her willingness to make bold choices. She reformed the office, focusing on reducing racial disparities in the justice system and addressing issues like recidivism. She wasn't afraid to be the voice of reason, even when that voice went against the tide of the establishment. She faced fierce opposition, but it was her commitment to fairness that won her respect. Under her leadership, San Francisco saw a noticeable decline in crime, a testament to her belief that justice could be both compassionate and effective. Her ascension to the role of California's Attorney General was another step in her long journey of breaking barriers. As AG, she became a fierce advocate for the rights of the people, fighting against the big corporations and powerful interests that sought to exploit vulnerable communities. She took on Wall Street banks, holding them accountable for their role in the housing crisis. She fought for LGBTQ+ rights, pushing for marriage equality even before it was federally mandated. And when California faced an unprecedented wave of wildfires, Kamala was there, leading the charge for stronger environmental protections, ensuring that the state's most vulnerable communities weren't left behind. But her real breakthrough came when she was elected to the U.S. Senate. There, she quickly made a name for herself as a sharp, no-nonsense leader with a focus on equity and justice. Her questioning during Senate hearings became legendary, with her poised, relentless approach leaving even the most seasoned politicians on edge. She wasn't afraid to ask the tough questions, and she didn't let anyone, Republican or Democrat, off the hook. Her performance in these hearings revealed the depths of her character. Not only was she fearless, but she was deeply empathetic, a woman who understood the struggles of everyday Americans. It wasn't long before her name began circulating as a potential presidential candidate. Kamala's campaign was built on a vision of hope, unity, and progress, one that included everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background. She ran on a platform of reforming healthcare, expanding civil rights, and tackling climate change head-on. She promised to fight for justice, to make sure that no one was left behind. Her charisma, intelligence, and compassion resonated with millions, especially those who had long felt invisible in American politics. Though she didn't win the presidency, Kamala's journey wasn't over. The Democratic Party saw in her a leader who had already fought battles in the courts, in the Senate, and in the hearts of millions. In 2020, when Joe Biden selected her as his running mate, it was a historic moment. Kamala Harris became the first woman, the first black woman, and the first person of South Asian descent to be elected Vice President of the United States. It was the culmination of a lifelong commitment to public service and to fighting for justice. Yet, even as she took on this new role, she was still deeply aware of the challenges ahead. The fight for equality, for racial justice, for climate action, these were battles she had already fought, but they were far from over. The stakes had only grown higher. And now, as the vice president, Kamala found herself in the most intense political battle of her career, one that would test her resolve like never before. As Kamala stood on that debate stage, facing down George Conway's hypocritical attack, she wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for every person who had been told they didn't belong. She was fighting for the millions who had placed their trust in her, who had seen in her a woman who wasn't afraid to take on the system, no matter how powerful or entrenched it seemed. Her journey had been one of overcoming obstacles, breaking down walls, and constantly striving for a more just, equal society. This wasn't just about policy. It was about the very values that had defined her life, values that had been shaped by her family, her upbringing, and her unshakable belief in the power of justice. And as she prepared to face Conway's attack, she knew that this moment, this confrontation, wasn't just another chapter in her political career. It was the culmination of everything she had fought for. Kamala Harris was not just a politician. She was a symbol of hope, a beacon of dignity and truth in a world that often seemed to be drowning in hypocrisy. And as she prepared to stand tall against Conway, she carried with her the weight of history, of her ancestors, and the dreams of those who had believed in her long before she ever set foot on that stage. The tension in the room is thick, almost suffocating, as Conway's voice cuts through the silence, each word dripping with disdain. He's on the attack, and he's not holding back. You call yourself a leader, he sneers, yet your administration can't even keep basic promises. The American people are suffering, and you've done nothing but push your own agenda, while ignoring the real problems. Your party's inability to deliver on even the simplest of promises proves that you're just another cog in the machine of failure. Conway's eyes burn with a mix of arrogance and frustration, as if he's hoping to provoke Harris into a defensive posture, to rattle her. But Kamala Harris doesn't flinch. Her expression remains unchanged, calm, composed, and unwavering. The contrast between the two could not be more stark. Conway, visibly agitated, hurls insult after insult, each one meant to destabilize his opponent. But Harris? She doesn't rush. She doesn't snap. She listens, absorbs, and responds with a cool confidence that contrasts so sharply with Conway's desperation. The American people are not looking for blame, Harris begins, her voice measured, but with an underlying strength that commands attention. They're looking for solutions. They're looking for leadership that brings people together, that focuses on building a better future. What we're doing isn't easy, and it's not about grandstanding or finger-pointing, it's about making real, tangible progress. That's what we're working toward every single day. Conway's face hardens. He leans forward, trying to close the gap between them, his eyes narrowing in on Harris like a predator. But progress? Progress? Let's talk about progress. Your administration promised healthcare for all, and yet people are still struggling. Your policies, your party, has failed them. And now, you have the audacity to stand there and claim you're making progress. Where's the accountability? Where's the action? Harris takes a deep breath, the weight of his words hanging in the air. But instead of reacting, she simply shifts her posture slightly, her gaze focused on the audience, her words sharp and precise. Progress isn't always about immediate perfection. It's about taking steps forward, even when the road is long and challenging. We passed the American Rescue Plan, which provided direct relief to millions of families struggling through this pandemic. We're fighting for universal childcare and making sure people can live with dignity in their old age. We're advancing climate change initiatives that have been ignored for decades. This administration has done more in 2 years than your political allies did in the last decade. Conway's jaw tightens, his hand gripping the podium as if holding on to the last shred of his control. He's no longer just challenging her on policy, he's trying to break her. But all of that, it's nothing but distractions. You talk about bills and policies, but what about the scandals? What about the corruption? You sit there pretending to be above it all, but you're as much a part of the Washington elite as the rest of them. Don't pretend you're some savior. The people see through it. The room is alive with murmurs. Conway has crossed a line, his words more venomous than ever, but Harris remains a picture of composure. She doesn't rise to the bait. Instead, she waits, pauses, allowing her calm to wash over the room like a wave. George, she says, her voice steady but firm, the problem with your argument is that it ignores the very people we're fighting for. You're so caught up in your need to attack and undermine, that you've lost sight of the fact that the people we serve are the ones who matter. We don't do this for power, or for accolades. We do this because the American people deserve more than empty rhetoric. They deserve a government that actually works for them. She pauses again, letting her words settle in the silence that follows. The room is still. Everyone is listening. The audience is hanging on her every word, waiting for the next move. And as for your accusation of corruption, she continues, her tone cool, almost conversational, I'll remind you that it's your party that has repeatedly obstructed meaningful reform. It's your party that has made deals with the very forces that keep our system broken. So, if you're looking for corruption, you might want to start by looking a little closer to home. The mic drop moment is near, but for now, Harris's poise and confidence radiate in the room, cutting through the chaos of Conway's desperate attacks. Conway, clearly rattled, stumbles in his response. His face flushes with frustration, but it's too late. He can feel the ground slipping beneath him. The contrast between them couldn't be clearer. Conway's desperate need to disrupt, to provoke, is met with Harris's clarity, logic, and calm. His attacks are losing steam, while her rebuttals only grow stronger. The audience can feel it, Conway is unraveling, and Kamala Harris is standing tall, poised to deliver the final blow. The tension in the room reaches its peak. The battle between the two is no longer just a matter of policy, it's become a contest of character, and the stakes have never been higher. But what happens next, how Harris will turn the tables, how she will dismantle the last vestiges of Conway's argument, is still to come. And the room knows it. Everyone is waiting. The countdown to the final moment has begun. The room is on edge as Kamala Harris stands before Conway, her calm composure a stark contrast to the chaos of his desperate attacks. For a moment, everything feels suspended in time. Conway, hunched over, his face flushed with frustration, is looking for the next crack in Harris's defense, the next way to land a blow. He leans in, ready to fire off another round of accusations. But before he can speak, Harris raises a hand, just one hand, a simple gesture, and the room goes quiet. The power in her silence is undeniable. Every eye in the room shifts to her, and in that stillness, it's as if the entire world has narrowed down to this one pivotal moment. She doesn't rush. She doesn't need to. She's been waiting for this. The words come slowly at first, deliberate, but with the sharp precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "George," she begins, her voice steady, "I've listened to you, and I've heard every accusation you've made. But what I haven't heard is any real understanding of the facts. You talk about corruption, about failure, yet, I find it curious how quick you are to ignore the very hypocrisy that you, yourself, have embodied." The room shifts. Conway's jaw tightens, but Harris doesn't flinch. Her eyes lock on his, unyielding, as she steps forward, delivering her words with the power of undeniable truth. "You've spent years criticizing this administration, calling out every perceived flaw, every mistake, but somehow you've missed the glaring contradictions in your own actions." Harris lets the words hang in the air, like a weight dropping onto the table. The crowd can feel it. Her tone shifts, turning almost conversational, but the sting is sharper than any attack. "You, George, are a man who calls for accountability, but where is yours? You criticize the government for being corrupt, for being too deeply entrenched in its ways, but you've spent your entire career doing the same thing, playing the game, cozying up to the very establishment you claim to despise. You talk about truth, but all I see is a man more interested in self-preservation than honesty." The words are piercing now, each one landing with pinpoint accuracy. "When you were part of the Lincoln Project, a group founded to fight the very forces you once supported, you conveniently overlooked your own involvement in the system you now condemn. You talk about the corruption of Washington, but let's not forget that you've enjoyed the fruits of that very same system. And for all your bravado, when it comes time to actually take a stand, you've folded, time and time again. It's easy to throw stones from a glass house, but it's harder to admit you're living in one." Conway stares at her, his chest rising and falling with anger, but the fight in his eyes is faltering. The audience, once tense and uncertain, now feels a shift. Harris's words are not just facts, they're an indictment, a slow burn that refuses to let up. "Let's talk about your credibility, George," Harris continues, the rhythm of her voice building. "You've made a career out of pointing fingers, but you've failed to take a good look in the mirror. You've criticized others for their lack of integrity, while conveniently forgetting your own role in the very system you vilify. The truth is, you've spent more time chasing headlines than you have in actually fighting for the very people you claim to care about. You're not a truth teller, George. You're a distraction." With each word, the room grows heavier. Conway's face turns a shade darker, his posture stiffening as though he's bracing himself for the next blow. But Harris doesn't let up. She steps forward just slightly, letting the moment build with the weight of her words. "You talk about leadership," she says. "You talk about what the country needs, but what you really want is to be the one in the spotlight. The same man who spent years enabling Trump's policies, whether you want to admit it or not. You gave up your voice when it was needed most. And now, here you are, pointing fingers at others, when it's clear you've been just as complicit in the breakdown of this system." A gasp ripples through the audience. Harris's accusation lands with the precision of a hammer striking steel. Conway, caught off guard, opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. The silence stretches. The crowd is stunned. Harris, feeling the power of the moment, delivers the final blow. If you want to call out hypocrisy, George, you should start with yourself. Because the only thing more dangerous than the lies and corruption in Washington is someone who pretends to be above it all, while making excuses for their own failures. You're not a critic, George. You're a coward. And the people of this country deserve better. The room goes completely silent. For a moment, it feels like time has frozen. Conway's face is flushed, his lips parting as if to respond, but no words escape him. His earlier smugness has vanished, replaced by a stunned, frustrated silence. And then it happens, the shift in the room. The tension that had hung in the air like an electrical storm is suddenly released, not with anger, but with awe. The crowd, which had once been on edge, now exhales in unison. The weight of Harris's words lingers, a sharp clarity that cuts through the noise and distractions of the political theater. A few tentative claps begin in the back of the room, followed by more, building into a wave of applause that ripples across the entire hall. The sound of hands slapping together echoes, and soon the applause is deafening. Kamala Harris stands tall, her back straight, her expression unwavering. She has dismantled Conway's argument, not with rage, but with poise, facts, and a ruthless commitment to the truth. Conway, still speechless, stands frozen at the podium, his posture slumped as he realizes he has been thoroughly outmatched. The cameras flash, capturing the moment as history unfolds. Harris doesn't bask in the moment, she simply nods in acknowledgement, a quiet smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She knows this battle is over, and she's won it, not with bluster, but with grace, intelligence, and the unshakable force of truth. As the applause swells, the feeling in the room is palpable, there's a mix of disbelief, admiration, and a touch of awe at how thoroughly Harris has taken down the man who thought he could break her. The mic drop has landed, and the silence that follows is as powerful as the roar that precedes it. This moment isn't just a victory in a debate, it's a triumph of integrity over hypocrisy. The room, and the nation, have witnessed something historic. And for Kamala Harris, this was just another step in her long, unyielding fight for justice. The debate had ended, but the reverberations were just beginning. As soon as the final question was asked, the world shifted its gaze to the screen, watching as Kamala Harris's victory over George Conway unfolded. The moment was undeniable, and within minutes, social media was on fire. The first tweet came from a verified account, something simple but powerful, #KamalaShutdown. It went viral instantly. Every second, the hashtag gained momentum, as millions of people rushed to share their thoughts on Harris's masterful takedown of Conway. Thousands of tweets poured in from across the globe, each one adding to the swelling wave of admiration for the vice president. The phrase, "Conway owned," was also quickly adopted, appearing in meme after meme, each one a reminder of the hypocrisy exposed, and Conway's stunned silence. The viral floodgates were wide open. People weren't just sharing thoughts, they were creating entire threads dedicated to dissecting the moment. One viral thread, written by a political commentator, compared Harris's handling of Conway to iconic moments in history, likening her precision to a surgeon performing an operation, cutting through the false narratives Conway had tried to weave. It was clear, Kamala Harris had just made a major statement in the political arena, and it wasn't just for those watching in real time. It would echo through the days, weeks, and months ahead. On Instagram, a meme surfaced of Harris calmly standing at the podium, with the caption, "When the truth is your best weapon, and silence is your greatest strength." The post was reshared by influencers and celebrities alike, flooding feeds with admiration. Even politicians from both sides of the aisle began to weigh in. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "This is what leadership looks like." Kamala Harris didn't just shut down the debate, she shut down the lies. Meanwhile, on Twitter, influencers began to add their own takes. Actress Kerry Washington shared a post, "Kamala Harris turned the volume down on George Conway's hypocrisy, then cranked up the truth." Hashtag Kamala shut down fire. Her post was shared more than 50,000 times within hours, sparking even more conversation among celebrities who rallied behind Harris's composure. The news outlets quickly jumped on the story. CNN, MSNBC, and even conservative-leaning platforms like Fox News couldn't ignore the magnitude of the moment. Political pundits from across the spectrum weighed in, and the consensus was clear: Harris had emerged victorious. On CNN, political commentator Van Jones praised her response, stating, "This wasn't just about the debate, this was about the moral high ground. Kamala Harris showed America what integrity looks like." The room nodded in agreement as the network played back clips from the debate, highlighting Harris's calm, methodical approach compared to Conway's desperate, flailing attacks. On Fox News, however, the tone was a little more somber. Conway's reputation was swiftly being questioned by the network's anchors. "It's hard to argue with the facts," one anchor said. Harris not only held her ground, but she also dismantled Conway's entire argument. "It's a moment that could haunt him." Conway had long been positioned as a critic of Trumpism, a beacon of moral clarity within a fractured party. But now, after his public collapse, it was clear his credibility was severely damaged. The critiques were rolling in fast, former allies began distancing themselves, and online, memes of Conway's stunned silence were plastered across screens, mocking the man who had once prided himself on being an intellectual voice for the right. Meanwhile, influencers from the progressive side of the political spectrum were all in on the narrative. Podcaster and activist Sean King tweeted, "What a day for the truth. Kamala Harris showed us that facts, truth, and integrity still matter. Let's keep pushing for more moments like this." His tweet was shared by thousands, and the ripples of support for Harris grew louder. Conway's response, when it came, was far from the strong retort he had hoped for. His Twitter account remained mostly silent as the backlash grew. The only statement he made, days after the debate, was a defensive, rambling post claiming he'd been misunderstood, but it fell flat. His apology was seen as hollow, more a desperate attempt to salvage his reputation than a genuine reckoning. The damage was already done. The American people had witnessed his collapse, and his earlier criticisms of Harris now seemed hollow, made all the more absurd in light of his own failures to live up to the standards he had set for others. Political insiders began speculating about the long-term impact of the debate. Harris's performance wasn't just a win for her, it was a win for the progressive cause, for those pushing for accountability, integrity, and transparency in a political system that had long been dominated by chaos and lies. Her composure, her command of the facts, and her sharp, calm dismantling of Conway's attacks had earned her a new level of respect. Some pundits even suggested that this moment might be the turning point in Harris's political trajectory, propelling her forward in a way that a traditional policy speech never could. On the other hand, Conway's political future seemed uncertain. Once seen as a potential figurehead for the conservative anti-Trump movement, his credibility was in freefall. No longer could he claim the mantle of moral authority, his contradictions were laid bare for the public to see. The media would likely continue to play and replay the moment, exposing the cracks in his persona with every passing day. It was clear now, Conway was a man who had spent too much time building himself up by tearing others down, only to be undone by his own lack of integrity. Across the nation, the public discourse shifted. Those who had been skeptical of Harris's leadership were now reassessing their positions. The moment had exposed Conway for who he truly was, and in the process, it elevated Harris as a force to be reckoned with. For many, the debate wasn't just a victory in the political arena, it was a personal affirmation of the values they held dear: truth, justice, and standing up for what's right. Harris had turned the tables, and now, the shockwaves of her victory were rippling through the media, through social media, and through the very fabric of American politics. The moment had gone viral, and the world was watching. The power of her words, her poise, and her unshakable commitment to truth had created a seismic shift. Conway's hypocrisy had been exposed, and there was no coming back from it. The victory wasn't just hers, it was for anyone who believed in a politics of integrity over manipulation, of truth over deception. As the days passed, the hashtag Kamala shutdown continued to trend. Conway's reputation in tatters. Harris's power more evident than ever. The debate, which had started as just another political spectacle, had evolved into something much bigger. It was a moment of truth, and it would go down in history as a pivotal moment in the fight for the soul of American politics. The lights in the room have dimmed, but the weight of the moment lingers. Kamala Harris stands before the crowd, her expression calm, but with a quiet fire in her eyes. The debate is over, the applause has subsided, and the noise of social media has begun to settle, but for Harris, this moment is not just another political victory, it's a statement. A statement about the kind of politics she believes in and the country she strives to build. She pauses for a moment, her gaze sweeping over the empty podium where George Conway once stood, lost in his own defeated silence. Her voice is steady but firm as she addresses the nation, the weight of the debate, and the far-reaching implications of what has just transpired. This wasn't just about winning a debate, she begins, her words measured but filled with purpose. This was about standing up for what is right, even when the forces around you tell you to stay silent. This was about truth in a time when it's all too easy to hide behind lies. It was about integrity, in a system that often rewards those who are willing to bend, to manipulate, to deceive. She lets those words linger, allowing the weight of the moment to settle in. The audience, captivated by her clarity, listens intently. We live in a time when the lines between truth and falsehood are too often blurred. A time when people like George Conway believe they can play both sides, critique those in power while quietly aligning with the very system that perpetuates the inequality they claim to oppose. But let's be clear, you cannot claim the high ground while standing in the mud. Harris's voice grows more resolute. This fight, this victory, is not just mine. It's for everyone who has ever felt ignored, dismissed, or silenced. It's for those who have spent their lives fighting for justice, for fairness, and for a government that actually serves the people, not the powerful. It's for those who believe that integrity should be the foundation of our leaders, not their ability to deceive or deflect. She turns, facing the camera directly, speaking not just to the room, but to the millions watching at home. I know it's hard sometimes. I know it feels like the fight is endless. But I want you to remember this, the truth may not always be loud, but it is undeniable. The facts may not always be convenient, but they stand on their own. And the values we hold dear, integrity, fairness, accountability, they are worth fighting for, even when it feels like the odds are stacked against us. Harris pauses again, allowing the truth of her words to resonate with the audience. What we saw tonight, what we witnessed in that exchange, wasn't just a political argument, it was a clash of values. And in the end, the truth prevailed. Her voice softened slightly, but the message is just as powerful. This is about more than just politics. It's about who we are as a nation. It's about what we stand for. Are we a nation that allows hypocrisy to thrive, or are we a nation that holds ourselves and our leaders accountable? Are we a country where truth is a weapon to be wielded against injustice, or one where we let lies go unchallenged? The room, though empty now, seems to resonate with the collective energy of Harris's words. She has shifted the conversation from the specifics of the debate to the broader, universal truths that define the fabric of the country. The stakes are higher than just a political win, they are about the very soul of the nation. This moment, she continues, isn't about one debate. It's about every single person who believes in the promise of America. It's about standing up against those who try to divide us, to tear us apart with lies and fear. It's about unity in the face of division, truth in the face of falsehood, and justice in the face of corruption. Harris's face softens just slightly, but the resolve is still there, stronger than ever. We will face more battles. There will be more fights, more moments when it feels like the forces of cynicism and hate are winning. But let me tell you this, they will never win, as long as we continue to stand for what's right. As long as we continue to fight for justice. As long as we hold ourselves accountable to the values we say we believe in. She takes a deep breath, her eyes steady. The victory tonight was not just mine, it was a victory for every single person who has fought for the truth, for every single person who believes in the possibility of a better world. It was a victory for you, for the people who have fought, and who will continue to fight, for fairness, equality, and justice. Her voice grows stronger, filled with emotion and determination. So I ask you, don't just stand on the sidelines. Stand up for truth. Stand up for justice. Stand up for a government that works for the people, not the powerful. Stand up for integrity, for the dignity of every single person in this country. Because when we fight together, we can make a difference. Kamala Harris stands tall, her gaze unwavering. This isn't just about one debate. It's about a movement for truth, for justice, and for a country that holds itself to the highest standards. And we will continue to fight, because what's at stake is far greater than any one of us. It's about the future of this nation, and the values we choose to uphold. The room is silent, but the message lingers in the air, heavy with meaning. The battle for integrity, for truth, for justice, this was the fight of the moment, and it would continue long after the applause fades. The crowd support is palpable, and Harris's victory over Conway feels less like a political win and more like the beginning of something far larger. With one final, resolute look, Harris turns and walks off the stage, leaving behind not just a defeated adversary, but a nation now emboldened by the promise of truth and accountability. Kamala Harris's victory in the debate was more than just a political moment, it was a moment for the entire nation to pause and reflect on the values that truly matter. In the face of lies, manipulation, and hypocrisy, she stood firm, unwavering in her commitment to truth, justice, and integrity. And in doing so, she reminded us all that we must never settle for anything less than what is right. But this fight is far from over. The truth is, this victory isn't just hers, it's ours. It's a victory for every single person who believes in a better, more just future. It's a call to action for each of us to stand up for what we believe in, to demand accountability from our leaders, and to fight for the values that define us as a nation. This moment proves that when we stand together, when we hold ourselves to the highest standard, there is nothing we can't achieve. But it's up to all of us to keep pushing, to keep fighting for a government that works for the people, not the powerful. So, I urge you, don't let this be just a moment in time. Let it be a movement. A movement for truth, for justice, and for a future where integrity is the foundation of everything we do. If you believe in these values, if you're ready to take action, then join the fight. Subscribe to our channel, share this video, and spread the message far and wide. Let's build a movement that demands better from our leaders and holds them accountable. This is just the beginning. Together, we can make a difference. Let's fight for what's right, because the truth matters, and so do we.